This is your World War III update. Get a load of this. Airlines are preparing for nuclear war. They want to make sure that the birds can stay in the sky in such case of a limited nuclear strike. Most people, myself included, didn't know that if there was any nuclear detonation anywhere in the world, up until right now, all airlines would ground their planes because they wouldn't have insurance to fly. Okay? Well, that's all changing. We have some very ominous news to report today that I'm surprised is not catching on and getting more attention, considering it's on the mainstream media, or quasi-mainstream media, also known as the Telegraph. I think it perhaps might have something to do with the fact that many people are subdued by the prospect of peace negotiations and trade deals being brokered around the world. I think, personally, we're just in limbo right now. Trump sold some weapons to the Middle East, which pretty much anybody can do who has half a brain, and they're stalling on the trade deals with China because companies need more time to adjust. That's all that is. Okay, and Russia and Ukraine, that's just kabuki theater. That's going to amount to nothing, more of the same, and it's all just a big facade. Okay, now here's what's going on with this story, and this is actually very, very concerning. Get a load of this. Before you think it's just a racket to sell insurance, understand that airlines are likely the ones who wanted something like this because they anticipate something is going to happen. An emphasis on limited nuclear strike. As global tensions rise, particularly in Ukraine and Kashmir, airlines are taking steps to ensure they can continue operating even if nuclear war occurs. Traditional insurance policies dating back to the 1950s assumed that any nuclear detonation would lead to a full-scale global conflict, which would ground all civilian aircraft worldwide. However, with the possibility now of tactical nuclear weapons being used in more localized conflicts, new insurance policies are being developed to allow flights to continue in regions unaffected by the immediate conflict. Remember when I told you a couple years ago, I said they're going to normalize the use of low-yield tactical nuclear weapons, and all it's going to take is one country to break the seal. Now, there are two theaters where the use of nuclear weapons could potentially be contained to the regional level, and that, of course, is the Middle East with respect to Israel and Iran, and India and Pakistan. Okay, I think that's why this is being resurrected. Now, they say in this article on the Telegraph that they're acting as if tactical nuclear weapons are new. Tactical nuclear weapons have been around for the longest time. The Davy Crockett tactical nuke, I believe it was 15 kilotons, possibly even less than that. I think it was 1 kiloton, in fact. And that was something that was fired from a, a multiple launch rocket system or artillery shell. So, that's been around for a long time. And a lot of Cold War military tactics revolved around the use of low-yield tactical nuclear weapons used in combined arms warfare. So this is not necessarily a new thing. So why then is this all of a sudden something that airlines are worried about? Because, of course, I'm going to jump to the conclusion right away that, okay, this is just, the insurance companies fear-mongering to airlines, but they wouldn't be able to, airlines have to be the ones that have the demand, right? They're the ones who want to buy this, so they're the ones who do perceive this to be a very real threat. They don't want all of the planes to be grounded in such case of a nuclear strike somewhere on Earth. So they're anticipating that this very well could happen, and it could drastically impact their bottom line. The development of nuclear war insurance. Gallagher, the world's largest aviation insurance broker, began working on new insurance plans in response to Russia's threats of nuclear deployment against Ukraine in 2022. And I should remind people, you better check out your own insurance policies. Not that it's probably going to matter anyways if there's a full-blown nuclear war, but I was reading mine, going over it with my insurance broker the other day, and I distinctly noticed at the end that nuclear war is not covered. And we kind of had a bit of a chuckle about that because they know who I am. And I didn't know that. I figured, not that I care anyways, because that's what we're prepping for, right? That's why we have our own insurance. But you might want to look into that if that's something that you're banking on. They ain't going to cover you And I mean, that should be, it's something I guess I probably unconsciously already knew, but to see it in writing is kind of surreal. Anyways, so the plan has gained new momentum following the recent tensions between India and Pakistan over Kashmir. Now, of course, they think that this is going to be a highly localized event. And of course, we've seen, apparently, according to one U.S. official now, that India did attack a weapons depot that was home to nuclear weapons, and that prompted the Pakistanis to call a meeting with their nuclear command. And they were getting ready to consider all options of going to nuclear war with India. Then the U.S. intervened. The nuke sniffer plane was flying overhead, doing some surveying. There's rumors that there's some kind of leak going on. Anyways, so the airlines in the UK, the United States, Brazil, New Zealand, they're saying to themselves, look, if there's a nuclear exchange there, we don't have to ground all our planes. We want to fly, and we can only fly if we have insurance. And it's a lot of money to insure a plane, okay? We're talking about billions of dollars. That's what the coverage is, okay? So it's not just like a small business or something like that, obviously. Every plane, okay, and there's thousands of planes. The insurance industry has adapted to the fact that nuclear weapons can now have a more limited impact, I should say, with tactical warheads carrying much lower yields than traditional bombs. So I've already said this is not true. So why are they making a big deal about it now, if not for the fact that they think that it's going to happen, right? These weapons are now considered more usable on the battlefield, making them a different risk than previously thought. That's bullshit. Their rationale is bullshit. It's because they think that the likelihood is much higher. So basically what we're going to have is nuclear bombs normalized. Once somebody breaks the seal, then Russia's probably going to use it because they weren't the ones to use it first. It's like once somebody does something, it becomes a lot easier for someone else to do something about it, and people are going to be desensitized to it at that point. In fact, I think after the first nuke, after a couple days, Bitcoin's going to rally, or some stupid shit, right? Some Trump coin, shit coin's going to rally, right? The U.S. has deployed tactical weapons like the B-61 air-launched gravity bomb, which has a yield as low as 0.3 kilotons. That is much smaller compared to the 15-kiloton bomb dropped on Hiroshima in 1945 and the 100-kiloton warheads carried by modern Trident II missiles. In fact, the dial-yield bombs, I believe they can go up to 300 kilotons. Okay, I mean, they have megaton warheads. I don't think they have them anymore. Actually, I think the Minuteman missiles, that might be a megaton, if I'm not mistaken. So, those are like not just city, those are metropolis killers. In the past, any nuclear detonation could have automatically triggered the grounding of all flights, as it was assumed to mean the outbreak of full-scale global war. However, the new insurance plan developed by Gallagher questions whether airlines should be grounded over minor nuclear detonations that do not directly impact other regions. The new insurance plan proposes that after a nuclear detonation, a group of 15 insurers, including Allianz, the world's largest insurer, would assess the safety of flying in specific regions. They would then allow airlines to continue operating in regions removed from those immediate conflict zones and insure those planes, because that could be very costly if a plane, got caught up in a mushroom cloud. The new policy would offer airlines $1 billion in coverage per aircraft for war-related damages, including passengers and third parties, which is lower than the traditional $2 billion in existing policies. The cost of insurance, they say, would be as low as a cup of coffee per passenger. Well, tacked on to what you already pay for your ticket, because of course they're going to pass that along to the consumer. In 2024, airlines spent around $1.3 billion on insurance premiums to cover over 4 billion passenger journeys, meaning the cost for this additional nuclear war coverage will be small and will be passed on to passengers in ticket prices. Now, approximately 100 airlines have already signed up for this new nuclear-related insurance plan, with 60 of them being based in Europe. However, low-cost carriers have shown reluctance to join the plan due to the added costs and the uncertainties involved. So just the big players are buying onto this, which is even more concerning. The plan would also allow airlines to work around other potential challenges, other near doomsday scenarios such as conflicts, volcanic ash clouds, or other major disruptions. So maybe these are the details that the devil is in, and that maybe this isn't even about the use of nuclear weapons, but is more about conflicts and volcanic ash clouds, right? End of the world type stuff. Or other major disruptions which typically don't ground all flights globally. Airlines have shown the ability to find solutions to such challenges, and this nuclear-related insurance model hopes to find a similar strategy. Despite the new insurance plan, just the idea here, though, that we're already at a point where we're starting to, like, the mutually assured destruction idea is starting to become demystified and debunked a little bit. Because I think what's happening is you're seeing the overstepping of red lines in Russia, and it's a much more gradual escalation than anybody ever suspected. And because of that, I think we're extrapolating that in such case of a nuclear exchange, that maybe that run up the escalation ladder will be slower than previously thought. Before I forget, there was an encounter today in the Baltic Sea. Remember, I've been saying that something's going to pop off in the Baltic because the Russian shadow fleet is being constantly harassed by European states who are trying to interdict these shipments and board these vessels. Well, today, the Russians flew an Su-35 after I believe it was the Estonian authorities attempted to board a Russian shadow fleet vessel. Well, the Russians sent one of their best fighter jets into the region, and they actually entered Estonian Nato airspace. So this was quite the fiasco, and I guess if they wanted to, NATO could have fired on that plane, or they could have intercepted the plane. I'm not sure what came after that, but this is how shit's going to go down. Okay, so, and as let's just say we take it at face value what they're saying, meaning that everything we hear on the mainstream media about what's going on right now is true, that these Istanbul talks have a chance of being successful, that the Iranian talks have a chance of being successful. If all that is true, then the extremist elements who don't want the wars to end are going to be activated, and they're going to run whatever sort of false flag provocation they have to run to ensure that things keep going. The more desperate they get, as soon as you hear about a prospective peace deal with Iran, and right now a very high-ranking Iranian official is saying that, hey, we actually would be okay with the idea of not enriching uranium anymore, and this is not confirmed yet, I should add, but this is the most recent up-to-date scuttlebutt at the time of making this video, that an Iranian official has made a statement with respect to they would be willing to cease uranium enrichment. They would have inspectors come in, but it's looking as though that's still going to be insufficient to even meet the most moderate of demands. And Congress today, I think it was 200 Republican senators signed a bill, or whatever you call it, not a bill, but a letter saying that you need to act on Iran now. So there's bipartisan support for, it's not just Republicans, but Democrats as well, for some sort of military action against Iran. Of course, Trump's not going to say anything like that while he's there, okay? As soon as he leaves, that's when the veneer is going to dissipate, and we're going to see exactly where everybody really stands in all of this. I think this was just buying time because he didn't want shit to be hitting the fan while he was on his trip. Where was I? So, despite the new insurance plan, airlines could still face grounding in the event of specific clauses being invoked, such as the 5 Powers War Clause. This clause would terminate coverage if a military conflict occurred between any of the 5 major powers, the UK, the US, France, Russia, or China. Why? Because it's assumed that if any of those countries were engaged in nuclear conflict with one another, it would quickly devolve into mutually assured destruction. Industry experts believe that if troops from the UK or France were involved in a conflict with Ukraine and were fired upon, which of course is now being reiterated and threatened once again by the very desperate European leaders, it could trigger the clause grounding airlines and invalidating the war cover. So they're still trying to find some workarounds there. That could be one thing that could put the brakes on this thing. There's also another story today. I'm not sure if you guys heard this, but Hungary allegedly shot down 2 Ukrainian drones. Now, this is not confirmed yet, but some people are jumping to some conclusions, and I'm not so sure I think this is even plausible considering Hungary's a NATO state. But, the idea previously is that Ukraine would be balkanized and Hungary would take off a chunk, Romania would take a chunk, Poland would take a chunk, and Russia would get the rest, and whatever was left of Ukraine or Kiev would be a rump state. So there's a distinct possibility that that is in fact happening. Who knows? In summary, as nuclear tensions rise, the insurance industry is adapting to allow airlines to continue operating in certain regions following a nuclear detonation, with tailored insurance policies that assess the level of risk on a country-by-country basis. These policies aim to address the more likely scenario of a tactical nuclear warhead being used, which would not necessarily result in global annihilation. Well, why wasn't that offered during the Cold War? Why is it offered now? It's because the likelihood of a nuclear event is still higher now than it ever has been before. Despite all of the handshakes and conciliatory language being used by the Trump administration, they're still sending weapons. What did I say yesterday? Just ignore everything and watch where the weapons are flowing. That's it. Because the whole policy right now is to try to bamboozle people as much as possible. Contradict yourself as much as you possibly can so people can't hit a moving target, right? So all you need to look at is, are the weapons still flowing to Ukraine? Are they getting more long-range HIMARS? Are they getting more Patriots? Yep, right? Are the weapons still flowing to Israel? Yep, 100%. That's all you need to know. So until that stops, that's the material reality on the ground, and that's what you have to go by. That's what the Russians go by. That's what the Chinese go by. And that's what the Iranians are looking at as well. They're looking at that material reality, not all the window dressing. There was another power outage in London today. A lot of strange stuff has been happening in London. I'm suspecting that there's a kinetic cyber war going on. Like there was the train stuff, there was the transformer that blew up, and now there was a power outage once again. The Spanish stuff going on now. I don't know if this is just your run-of-the-mill xenophobic news, but our guest that's been on a couple times, Jonathan Hollerman, who's a part of the EMP task force, was talking about this, and he was the first to, I think, make this fact known to people that there is Chinese, not necessarily Chinese malware, but the Chinese can remotely control or turn off certain aspects of transformers and different grid components that we rely on. In this case, the story is now broke, and I believe this is by Reuters, so it's mainstream of all mainstream, that in terms of the solar systems, that the Chinese can actually manipulate it from afar. So this is why you have to be very careful. If you get a modern day solar system and the company says, hey, hook your solar system up to the internet so we can control it remotely, and that's a thing that you can do, you might want to reconsider connecting that to your internet, because it could potentially be shut down completely or fried or whatever, right? So that's something that is going on right now. So, all of this talk about a trade deal being struck with China, look, it's not going to happen. They're postponing the inevitable. They cannot continue to empower the Chinese. That's what this comes down to. And they're trying to ensure that Saudi Arabia and Qatar is on board. I mean, think about these Qatar deals. They're talking about 1.3 trillion. The GDP of Qatar is $230 billion. So imagine how long they expect to be paying for this stuff. We're talking about decades, okay? And it's for planes and weapons. And I really just think that Saudi Arabia is going to be the distributor for U.S. weapons within the region and perhaps abroad, to kind of be the intermediary, so to do escalation management, essentially. Germany wants to be the biggest military in Europe. The Bundeswehr is not going to be one up by Poland. Okay, and remember, they had a spat recently about reparations that still didn't get resolved to this day. So a lot of these old tensions in Europe could start flaring up very, very soon. Putin was supposed to visit Iran, but as far as I know, that's been postponed. And I don't blame him, because if the Israelis can murk who was it? It was one of the Hamas leadership inside Iran on a very selective date on the presidential election day, then I'm quite certain that that's going to be a high security risk for Vladimir Putin to go to Iran right now. We have the expulsion of a Russian diplomat from Poland after it was determined that Russian saboteurs were behind a major mall fire in Poland. That's actually 72 hours old news, but I haven't done any World War updates lately. But it's worth knowing that consulate was shut down in Poland for Russia. Poland is installing hedgehogs on their borders between Belarus and Kaliningrad, so the militarization of the borders continues. The Iranian president told Trump that we will not submit to any blackmail. So again, we're seeing a lot of mixed messages coming out of the belligerents here. Hungarian outlets claim they shot down 2 Ukrainian recon drones in Tokaj, northeast Hungary today. What would Ukrainian drones be doing there? Or were they Russian drones? Who knows? But some people are thinking that they're going to annex part of southwestern Ukraine. Congress to Trump: don't cut Iran a deal, cut their nukes. Over 200 House Republicans told Trump to hit the brakes. No uranium, no enrichment, no wiggle room for Iran. No uranium, no enrichment. So I guess they need uranium. So they're saying basically that they have to get rid of their entire nuclear program. And again, Trump is giving mixed messages about this. He does have a tendency to make these maximalist demands, which is a old school sales tactic. You make these outrageous demands and then you settle somewhere in the middle. Could very well be what's happening, but I guess time will tell. But they want to dismantle all forms of enrichment. And apparently the Iranians are at least receptive. And I think what the Iranians are doing right now is they're trying to buy as much time as possible. Okay, every other week they're unveiling a new missile silo complex. And please appreciate one thing. Okay, appreciate that any day, every day you wake up, it just could be the day. Everything could be fine for a week. It's not worth a damn anymore. It doesn't matter if you have 10 green days in a row. That doesn't matter anymore. There is no momentum in one direction or the other. I remember when Clem was on the other day and he was talking about, look, if you want to follow the markets, you just, like his dad told him that all you have to do is just look which way the market's blowing. Like, where's the general momentum? Is it bullish or is it bearish? And just follow that trend. Ignore the intraday swing trading, but you can't do that anymore. And that's why I say Warren Buffett retiring is symbolic, because there is no country for old men. I've watched that movie many times, and then I had to go and I do some research on, like, what's the meaning of this movie? And the meaning of the movie is that in the modern post-postmodernism day, nothing is guaranteed. There is no truth. And the day-to-day undulations are just going to get wilder and wilder. And so you might be on cloud 9 one day, your Bitcoin account might be sky high, and the next day it just gets slammed, right? Gold can be $3,500 up, like, what was it, $150 in one day? And then it just gets slammed down to $3,200 for no reason, right? So there's no rationale to follow now. So this is what I mean. How things are going today has no bearing on how things are going to go tomorrow. Things could go sideways really, really fast. Doesn't mean you live your life in constant fear of the worst. It means that it's very easy now to acquiesce to good times. And you have a green day and you think that we have this recency bias. That's how things are going to be from now on. No matter how many times the pendulum just swings back and forth in more extreme fashion, We always succumb to that cognitive bias. But I tell you, who knows what's going to happen tomorrow? We could see a nuke tomorrow. I mean, really, it could happen tomorrow. It could start tomorrow. Israel could bomb Iran tomorrow. Iran could start True Promise 3 tomorrow. Pakistan-India war could start right now. And all the conditions are met for these things to happen, right? An attack could happen on Moscow. Ukraine could do some crazy shit right now. And it would be completely expected. It would be precedented. So don't get too overconfident. According to a White House source, during a past conflict scenario, Pakistan allegedly begged and attempted to blackmail the United States. Then Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif reportedly told President Trump that if India targeted Pakistan's military infrastructure, they would be incapable of defending themselves, including their nuclear assets. He warned that India had already begun destroying their air bases and as such was in a defenseless state. Nuclear sites could fall into the hands of terrorist groups. So this is another dimension that we haven't thought about, right? So Pakistan has a lot of crazy people. I mean, that probably didn't come out right. There's a lot of terrorist activity in Pakistan, notably, right? Osama bin Laden, if you believe that whole thing. That's something they have to deal with. And the risk is not just that India and Pakistan are going to go at it. The risk is that the nation state of Pakistan, the government there, could potentially lose control and these nukes could fall into the wrong hands. Sharif claimed that if that happened, Pakistan could not be held responsible. Given the threat of groups like the Taliban and TTP, which are known threats to Western nations, the U.S. became alarmed. And so they were the ones that put the brakes, not necessarily because they were worried about a nuclear war, but they were worried about nukes falling into the wrong hands. It was also noted that the Taliban had growing ties and understanding with India, further complicating the situation. As a result, the U.S. allegedly intervened, urging Pakistan to initiate a truce. Pakistan then contacted the Indians to request a ceasefire. This was reportedly followed by calls from U.S. officials, including J.D. Vance and Senator Marco Rubio, to Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and India's NSA urging restraint. The Indian Prime Minister issued a stern warning and agreed to the ceasefire under one clear condition. Any future terrorist attack on the motherland will be considered an act of war against the nation. And if that happens, they claim, Pakistan will be reduced to rubble. He made it clear that there was no formal agreement, only a strategic understanding, and that India's agreement to ceasefire was purely out of respect for U.S. President Donald Trump. All previously suspended treaties, he emphasized, remain off the negotiating table and are non-negotiable. So that's where they stand in that respect. In terms of the United States going to war with Russia, well, there's been some new information that came out about the Golden Dome that I'm going to go over in a future video. We're going to have to bust out the screen for that one. But the U.S. may need to go to war with Russia. This was stated by the head of the U.S. Northern Command and the North American Aerospace Forces, General Gregory Gouliot, in a written statement to the Senate Armed Services Committee. According to him, the likelihood of a direct confrontation with one of the key U.S. adversaries, be it Russia, China, Iran, or North Korea, is increasing, despite the fact that these countries are trying to avoid open conflict with Washington. The general believes that the belief of these states in the decline of the West provokes them to take increasingly bold steps, that power vacuum hypothesis, which increases the risk of miscalculations and unintended escalation. So, keep on prepping, my friends. Now is the time, May 15th. That's the deadline. You got to get your garden in the ground, okay? We're going to give you a tour of the greenhouse pretty soon, and I've been grinding, man. Like just 18-hour days, just non-stop. Because I walk the walk, and I believe what I say on this channel. Okay, everything I'm doing right now is to prepare for that eventuality. No matter how kooky and crazy it gets on the channel at times, and how much fun we try to have, because you got to have fun. The reality is, of course, I do honestly think that we're heading into some very tumultuous, tempestuous times. I want to show you guys something, okay? This is something I always try to show you new stuff that you haven't seen, right, in the survival, and I get all kinds of products here. So this is actually something that I've reviewed in the past, a lithium-powered shower. Just a way to move water from one place to another. Now, we've shown you pumps, and everybody should have a water pump in case you need to pump water from a creek. You can go and buy those from your local hardware store. But this is kind of neat. Flextail is a company that makes various gizmos and gadgets that are lithium based. They have a lot of like tiny mini air pumps that can also double as what would you call it, like a bellows to light a fire, to get your fire going. And they're good for, obviously pumping up an air mattress or something like that. But they make a lot of cool stuff. So we're actually going to do a review of this and other products of theirs in the future. Just the ability to move water from one place to the next and to have a portable shower in the woods is, I'm not going to say it's indispensable, but it's one of those amenities that once you have it, you're going to want to keep it. And of course, something that, is just tried and true on the channel, two of my favorites. Okay, these are probably my favorite peak refuels: chicken broccoli and chicken coconut curry. I would probably eat them a lot more, but seeing as I've been on a diet and I've been fasting for the longest time, I don't get the luxury of eating throughout the day. So, but when I did, these would be them. And the thing I like about these is they have a lot of calories. So this one has 1,090 calories, almost 1,100 calories, and this one has 850 calories, and it's got a lot of protein. So really, two of these you could survive for a day. Now, they are more expensive. They're about 20 bucks a pop, so they're not cheap, but they're good. They're going to last a long time, and disregard the expiration dates, even though it doesn't say 2050 like Mountain House. It's freeze-dried food. It's in a Mylar bag. There's an oxygen absorber. That's going to last forever. The only reason why they can't put that on there is because they don't have the certification yet, because they haven't been in business long enough. They don't want to pay for the testing. It's all the same shit. That can of food, that's not an expiration date. Okay, that's a best before date. But you can tell people that until you're blue in the face, and they just won't get it. Though most people, you know what? I actually think that there's a good portion of the population, when it hits the fan and Armageddon comes, there's going to be a house full of food and they're going to throw it out because it's expired. That's the world we live in. Go and watch my previous video that I released. It's kind of a blue strip, red strip, should be a blue strip. It's the 5 stages of becoming a prepper and how the grieving process it wasn't Kubler-Ross. Who was it? Was it Kubler-Ross? I can't remember. 5 stages of grief: denial, bargaining, anger, acceptance, depression. Those not in that particular order. Anyways, I apply that to how people become preppers, and I think you might hopefully find some insight from that video. And if not, please leave your comments, but go and watch those videos, guys. That's what we got to be focused on. We got enough bad news. We know it's inevitable. We know there's going to be a clash of superpowers. So just do everything you can right now to get yourself on that track, but don't make any hasty decisions. This is not a problem that is going to be resolved by your credit card. You can do it piecemeal, but at the end of the day, it's the big macro preps that you want to focus on, right? It's the land. It's the ability to have regenerative systems that are not only going to serve you in such case of a grid down situation, but are actually going to pay themselves off, because you're going to be getting a return on that investment, whether it's a solar system or having growing food and not having to pay taxes. I mean, I guess you don't pay taxes on food, but you have to pay for it at the grocery store, and you can get something out of the earth if you just put a little bit of sweat equity into it. So anyways, enough with the lecture. If you want those products, click the link in the description below, or just go to CanadianPreparedness.com. We got tons of stuff like this that you probably haven't seen anywhere else. Thanks for watching, guys. Take care.